We go. Oh, okay. All right. When I was growing up, I always heard my dad say, never ask about religion or politics. In fact, to drive that point home, when I was 8 in 1976, I asked my dad who he voted for in that presidential election. Well, honey, it's not polite to ask that question, he said. Maybe some of you have similar experiences. Back then, it just wasn't talked about. Some days I kind of wish we could go back to those times. When I began creating art in earnest through my artist trading cards, I stuck to apolitical or non political collages, which was easy to do. This was 20 years ago and pre social media, when one could easily avoid any uncomfortable topics if they chose. In fact, I was more prone to using humor in my cards than anything else. I've been a full time artist for 15 years already. And in those early years, I was very low key about my politics. I didn't want to alienate half of my potential audience. And it annoyed me that everything had become so intensely political. I mean, these were the early Obama years, and I naively thought that we had it all figured out. Why rock the boat when things were improving and the path forward looked so hopeful? Knowing where I live, and having to work among friends and neighbors with different opinions made taking a stand uncomfortable for me. I found myself self censoring at times, not wanting to rock the boat unless it was completely warranted. Those closest to me were very aware of how I felt about politicized topics and my stance on those issues, but I also didn't feel the need to announce to the world via social media my personal take on things. I would voice my opinion on my art occasionally, like when I created this piece in 2010. Nothing about it seems out of the ordinary at all, except that the title of this piece is called Save Our Saturday Service. I've always loved the post office. I started my first stamp collection when I was 7, and I have been collecting stamps ever since. I created this piece in 2010 when once again the idea of canceling Saturday postal delivery was on the table. Thankfully, that never came to pass. But it felt kind of good to voice my opinion through my artwork, even though the opinion was pretty non confrontational for about 95% of the viewers that saw it. But after my niece was diagnosed with Stargardt's disease in 2011, I thought of ways I could bring awareness to her condition, which is essentially juvenile macular degeneration. So in the spring of 2013, I had gotten some of my friends together to create artworks that were only a quarter-inch square, artwork that was hard to see. Julie Belson at Gallery and Frame Shop hosted the exhibit of these works, and all of the proceeds from the sales went to Foundation Fighting Blindness. We raised $1,100 from that show, and it felt really good to use my position as an artist for this platform, but I still wasn't doing anything political. Then, in 2017, one of my art friends, the Appleton Oshkosh painter Christian Anderson, created a downtown-wide exhibit in Oshkosh entitled The First 100 Days, The Artists Respond. It was held in late April, coinciding with the first 100 days of Trump 45's presidency. And this, my friends, is what radicalized me, as it may have for some of you as well. I had just created an exhibit for the UW Fond du Lac Galleries entitled Plastic, Not Fantastic, and it featured a large fallen branch from a tree in our yard that I had covered in strips of brightly colored plastic, grocery store bags. I then hung intact grocery store bags from the branches of the tree piece. The artwork was in response to former Governor Walker's ban on banning plastic bags in Wisconsin and Trump's idea that somehow clean coal was going to power our nation, thereby adding more pollution and fossil fuels back into our environment, hurting our ecosystems even further. When that exhibit ended, I took that branch piece to a gallery in Oshkosh and participated in that first 100 days exhibit. It felt incredible to be a part of the collective grief we were sharing through our artwork. Later that year, I was invited to be a part of a steamroller print exhibit by the incredible printmaker and then UWGB printmaking professor Christine Style. Steamroller prints are where large woodcuts are printed using an actual steamroller, as you can see here. It's not really a steamroller, they're gas powered now, but they still call them steamrollers. For this particular print, there were 26 of us who each got a letter of the alphabet that coincided with the Wisconsin idea. For those of you who didn't know until just now, the Wisconsin idea is the notion that university learning should benefit everyone in the state through its research and knowledge. I love this definition by Adlai Stevenson II. The Wisconsin tradition meant more than a simple belief in the people. It also meant faith in the application of intelligence and reason to the problems of society. It meant a deep conviction that the role of government was not to stumble along like a drunkard in the dark, but to light its way by the best torches of knowledge and understanding it could find. Hear, hear. So appropriate, even, or maybe even especially 121 years later. But in 2017, the year this exhibit was held, then Governor Walker tried to have the Wisconsin idea removed from the UW system's mission statement. That motion failed, thankfully, after much backlash. But my letter for this print happened to be the letter Y. I couldn't think of anything directly relating to the letter Y that pertained to the Wisconsin idea, so I titled my piece, Yes Sirree Bob, after Robert Bob LaFollette Sr., the Wisconsin governor and senator who used these tenets in progressive politics. Here is my Y in the finished alphabet print, which measured 4 by 6 feet. By now, I was getting more comfortable being a part of the exhibits where I essentially got to protest with my art and in a group setting. That helped a lot. Maybe you feel the same way, that solidarity and working together for a common goal is so much more hopeful than just doom scrolling on your phone, which I still do, unfortunately. A couple of years later, I was invited by my friend Carol to be a part of a Birds and Art Group exhibit, which was in conjunction with World Migratory Bird Day. I almost turned it down because I really didn't use birds in my art at this point and didn't know how to go about creating art using birds. But then I remembered my stamp collection. I went through the hundreds of stamps I had and found the most beautiful bird-related stamps I owned, and then recreated them as dry point prints. I had so much fun with this that for the next 4 years, I added to that collection and participated in Fond du Lac's World Migratory Bird Day celebrations at local galleries in conjunction with Laura DeGolier's events. It was my way of shining a spotlight on how light pollution, climate change, and environmental hazards are wreaking havoc on our bird populations. I actually never considered this to be a political protest, but of course it is. It's very sad that these particular topics have become so divisive, but they have. I began to realize in earnest that it was imperative that we speak up in whatever way we can, not just commiserate with friends and family about these things. I still do that too. There was a very good reason for protest in 2020 that happened locally. During the first city council meeting of June, which was June 10th, I believe, there was to be a proclamation for Pride Month in the city of Fond du Lac. Brian, my husband, was president at the time, and of course, very happy to announce this proclamation. Since proclamations are by their very nature never political, or so we thought, it was going to be announced, the certificate handed out, and that would be that. But another council member made sure there was a large contingent of residents filling the chambers who wanted this proclamation taken off the docket and never return. What followed was about 2 hours of residents taking their 1 minute to support or protest this very simple proclamation. At the end of it, the council did indeed vote to keep the proclamation intact by a vote of 6-1, but because of that one incident, proclamations are no longer announced. This made me furious. A very large percentage of Brian's and my friends are in the LGBTQIA plus community, and I wanted to support them somehow. So I created this print, which is the pride flag, and I donated all the proceeds to the Fond du Lac Pride Alliance, which was a group at the time. I wanted everyone to be seen, however, so I wound up creating a flag for every group represented in the LGBTQIA plus community. I figured something good had to come out of this ridiculous and shameful situation. Well, now I was on a roll. I was invited to have a solo exhibit at Art Start Rhinelander in their glass gallery in 2021 during the height of the pandemic. That meant that no one would actually be in the gallery, visiting, but there were many photos and also a virtual reception. I entitled my show The Post Office, a Love Letter, and created a multimedia exhibit all about my love of the United States Post Office. I created a series of 6 collages showing a 1930s era post office setup, a set of 10 international airmail labels done in dry point, a sculpture of toy metal post office boxes, which I entitled Taking DeJoy Out of the Post Office, in response to Louis DeJoy becoming a very dangerous postmaster general. And what I called my subversive stamps, which were dry point prints created from actual American stamps in my collection, stamps which, when they were issued, were probably not controversial at all, but today seem downright progressive and liberal. Topics like science, family planning, organized labor, collective bargaining, and free and fair elections. Stamps that probably no one either noticed or may have groused about for 2 seconds and then forgot about, would today be shared online as part of some sort of left-wing agenda, and the thought of that just made me mad. So into the show they went. And speaking of the pandemic, in 2021, I also used that horrific time to celebrate mask wearing when I submitted a piece to that year's TMA Contemporary exhibit at the Trout Museum of Art in Appleton. And to my delight, it made the cut. This print was never meant to be a protest piece. It's a print I created from a photo I took of our actual mask basket that we had by our back door. As I was creating the print, I was thinking about all of the wonderful people who had created these masks for us. Each mask was made by someone we knew, friends and family and local artists. If I were to take these masks out of the drawer now, I would remember who made every single one of these. That's how much it meant to me that these were created to protect us. To me, mask making in 2021 was the kindest act of service one could perform. That this became political is still astounding to me, and the fact that it remains political is just abhorrent. So now I'm really glad that this piece exists. I only have one last example of my artwork in a political realm, but work that was created out of a completely joyful experience that only later became a political statement. Last October, I was doing an artist residency at the Art Colony in Grand Marais, Minnesota. I go up there every 6 months or so because I love it there. But this time, the weather just happened to be spectacular for early October. It was in the 60s and 70s and sunny every day. So I spent one of those days in the Superior National Forest. It was magical. The woods has always been that place where I go to feel happiest. Walking in the woods is my sanctuary, and it has helped me get through some very tough times in my life. I was really inspired after this trip to the forest to create what I call my forest floor collages. These are pieces where I use papers and fabrics that I've dyed, machine and hand embroidery, beads, birch bark, and other prints I've made to create pieces that I think resemble the forest floor. I'm so happy when I'm creating these pieces. But then this past winter, out came the news that many national forests, including Superior, will be at some point used for timber production. The minute I heard that news, these pieces became protest pieces in spite of themselves. And I have absolutely been speaking out about these developments when showing these pieces in exhibits. Here's an example from a show that's currently running in Oak Park, Illinois called Microcosm, which are my forest floor collages in very, very miniature. The forest is my sanctuary and has been my entire life. Some of my earliest memories happened in a wooded area behind my childhood home on walks with my dad. I loved these walks, and I felt a real sense of peace there. I remember wanting to live in the forest after reading Jack London's The Call of the Wild in 5th grade, which was further cemented after having to memorize Robert Frost's Stopping by the Woods on a Snowy Evening that same year. I am also deeply concerned about the environmental impact our current climate has had and will continue to have in these sacred spaces. Wildfires, invasive species, wild temperature fluctuations all wreak havoc on these delicate ecosystems. It is my hope that by seeing these miniature collages, tiny views of grand spaces, the viewer is reminded of the impact the forest and wooded areas plays in all of our lives and may feel compelled to visit and protect these precious parcels of land. In the past 10 years or so, I've realized that by creating protest art for those issues I hold dear, not only helps me deal with my anger and sadness and fear, it also possibly makes others realize they're not alone in their worries. In some cases, people may actually learn they have allies who care. Art can help bring folks together for a common cause because art has the ability to speak when words fail us. Even on this, the 5th anniversary of George Floyd's death, I want to end this talk on a high note, and that is, if any of you in this room have been creating, in the last 4 months especially, you too are resisting. If you're creating anything that makes you joyful, keep on doing that. Whether it's art, craft, music, dance, a meal, or even just zhuzhing up your wardrobe, when you're creating anything, you are telling the world that you don't despair. And we need that more than ever. Thank you.